The colony on Arkan was small, but to the people who lived there it was everything. Rows of steel buildings stood within a circle of tall walls, built to keep out the dangers of the wild. At first sight, Arkan seemed peaceful. Its skies were clear, its air sharp and cool, and its forests stretched far beyond the horizon. But the settlers knew better. They knew the forests were not empty. They knew the shadows beyond the wall were alive. Every night, the sounds began. A low growl would rise in the distance, followed by the rustle of leaves and the crack of branches. The noise always spread fear, for the settlers could not see what waited out there. They only saw dark shapes moving between the trees. No one left the gates after the sun set, for anyone who tried never returned. The walls of Arkan were strong, made from thick steel brought from the core worlds. The people trusted those walls, yet they never slept in peace. Children were taught from birth to respect the night, to keep to the lights, and to never ignore the warnings of the guards. Even the bravest soldiers did not dare step outside when the stars were high. Inside the colony, life tried to go on as normal. Farmers grew food in fields just inside the walls. Engineers kept the power running, making sure the lights never went out. Traders carried supplies from one end of the colony to the other. The people laughed in the day, but every face grew tense when the sun began to fall. On one such evening, Rallan stood watch at the northern wall. He was not the strongest soldier, nor the oldest, but he had sharp eyes and a steady hand. His pulse rifle rested against the wall beside him as he stared into the forest. The shadows between the trees grew long, stretching like fingers across the ground. He heard the first growl and stiffened. It was deep and heavy, like a drum echoing through the night. Other guards joined him at the wall. Myra, a quiet woman with a keen mind for machines, scanned the horizon with a small scope. Oren, broad and strong from years of farm work, gripped a heavy spear. They said little, for words felt small when the forest came alive. From the dark came movement. A shape passed between the trees, too large to be a human, too quick to be harmless. The guards raised their weapons, but the figure did not approach the wall. Instead, it lingered just beyond sight, its glowing eyes watching them. "The beasts are hunting again," Oren muttered, his voice low. Rallan said nothing. He had seen those eyes before, and he knew they were not wild like a simple animal's. They were sharp, filled with thought. The stories told by elders whispered of creatures that tested the walls, waiting for weakness. He did not doubt those stories. The colony bells rang, warning all settlers that the night was closing in. Families rushed indoors, doors locked tight, lamps burning bright. Silence fell across the settlement, broken only by the steady hum of the wall's lights. Still, the growls outside continued, closer this time. Rallan's heart pounded as he gripped his rifle. The steel wall was high, the weapons strong, but the fear came not from weakness of the colony, it came from the unknown. No one truly understood what lived in the shadows. Some said the beasts were born of the planet itself, guardians of the wild. Others claimed they were ancient hunters who had ruled this world long before humanoids arrived. Whatever the truth, the settlers only knew one thing: the beasts hated their presence. Hours passed, the night deepening. The guards stayed alert, though their eyes grew heavy. Then, a sound broke the air, a sharp crack, like a tree splitting in two. All heads turned as another crack followed, and then another. Something was moving closer, heavy and unstoppable. Myra whispered, "It is testing the wall again." The ground seemed to shiver as the sound grew louder. Rallan steadied his breath, raising his weapon toward the trees. His finger brushed the trigger, though he dared not fire unless ordered. A shape loomed at the edge of the forest, massive and hunched, with limbs that bent in strange ways. Its eyes glowed like burning coals, fixed on the colony. For a long moment, it stood still. The silence was so complete that even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a sudden roar, the creature struck the outer fence, its claws screeching against steel. Sparks flew, and the wall shuddered under the force. Alarms rang across the colony. Soldiers rushed to the wall, weapons aimed, while families prayed inside their homes. The beast growled again, but then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it pulled back into the trees. The forest swallowed it whole, leaving only the echo of its cry. The settlers stood in silence, their hearts racing. The wall still stood, but the message was clear. The beasts were watching. They were waiting. Rallan lowered his rifle, his mind heavy with thought. Tonight, the wall had held. But he knew the night would come when the beasts would not simply test the steel. They would come to break it. The days after the growling beast struck the wall were tense. The settlers of Arkan tried to continue their work, but every face carried unease. The farmers looked over their shoulders while working in the fields. The children played less, and even the engineers moved quickly when repairing lights or machines near the outer gates. Everyone felt the same truth in their hearts. The beasts were planning something. Rallan kept his eyes sharp during his watch. He thought of the glowing eyes in the forest and the way the beast had struck the wall, not with random rage but with purpose, as if testing the strength of the colony. He shared his worry with Myra and Oren, but the commanders dismissed him. They said the walls had held for years and would hold again. Still, Rallan's unease grew stronger each day. On the fifth night after the first strike, the air turned still. The moon hid behind thick clouds, leaving the colony in near darkness except for the electric lights on the walls. The guards whispered to each other, uneasy with the silence. Usually, the beasts announced their presence with growls and rustling, but tonight there was nothing. The quiet itself felt dangerous. Rallan stood at his post with Myra beside him. She checked the power meters on the wall again and again, as if expecting them to fail. Oren carried his heavy spear and kept his eyes locked on the forest. Suddenly, a sharp sound broke the silence. It was not the growl of a beast but the snap of metal. One of the outer fences sparked and went dark. Myra gasped. "The line has been cut," she whispered. Before they could react, a roar shook the night, followed by dozens more. From the trees came shadows, large and fast, racing toward the wall. The alarms blared across the colony, and lights flashed red. The beasts attacked with force unlike anything the settlers had seen. They moved in groups, leaping high, clawing at the steel, and slamming against the gates. Soldiers fired pulse rifles from the walls, their blasts lighting the night. Beasts fell, but others kept coming. Rallan steadied his weapon and fired at one that climbed the wall near him. The creature shrieked as it fell back, vanishing into the dark below. Oren struck another with his spear, driving it off before it could grab hold of the ledge. The settlers had always thought of the beasts as wild, but what they saw that night proved otherwise. The attackers did not fight blindly. They moved with strange unity, some beasts rushing forward while others pulled back, waiting for openings. They struck power lines, water tanks, and weak points in the wall. Each move seemed planned. Myra shouted over the noise. "They know where to hit. They are not only strong. They are thinking." Her words filled Rallan with dread. If the beasts were learning, then the colony was in far greater danger than anyone had believed. The battle raged on, the night filled with light and sound. The air smelled of smoke as fires spread near the gates. Soldiers shouted orders, and families huddled inside their homes, praying the walls would not fall. Rallan fought beside Oren and Myra, their teamwork keeping the beasts from climbing their section of the wall. Yet no matter how many fell, more shadows rushed forward. It felt endless, as though the forest itself had come alive to swallow the colony whole. Hours passed before the attack began to slow. Just as suddenly as it had started, the beasts pulled back. One by one, they retreated into the forest, their glowing eyes vanishing among the trees. The silence that followed was heavy and filled with fear. The settlers looked over the damage. Several walls were scarred with deep claw marks. 2 power lines had been destroyed, leaving parts of the colony in darkness. Water tanks lay shattered, flooding the ground. Several guards were wounded, though none had been taken. The beasts had fought with fury, but they had not pressed for final victory. Instead, it seemed they had been testing, learning. Commander Terran addressed the people in the central square. His voice was loud and firm, but his eyes betrayed unease. The beasts came to break us, but our walls have stood strong. We will rebuild what is lost. We will not fear shadows. The people cheered weakly, trying to believe his words. Yet Rallan felt no comfort. He had seen the way the beasts moved. They had not fought like mindless hunters. They had struck like soldiers. That night, when the fires were out and the wounded cared for, Rallan walked along the quiet wall with Myra. The stars had returned, and the forest lay dark again, calm as if nothing had happened. Myra spoke softly. They are not finished. Tonight was only the beginning. Rallan nodded. His heart was heavy, for he knew she was right. The first attack was not meant to destroy the colony. It was meant to study it. The beasts had learned the walls were strong, but also where they were weak. The settlers of Arkan had survived the night, but the shadow of fear stretched longer than ever. The beasts would return, and when they did, the real war would begin. The colony worked day and night after the first attack. Engineers fixed the broken power lines, farmers repaired the damaged fields, and soldiers sharpened their weapons. Everyone did their part, yet a shadow of fear hung over every street. The people whispered about the beasts in hushed voices, wondering when the next strike would come. Children no longer played in the open square, and families avoided the walls when darkness drew near. Rallan did not forget the way the beasts had fought. He had seen them cut power lines and strike water tanks as if they understood how the colony worked. These were not the actions of simple creatures. They had thought, they had planned, and that knowledge made him restless. One morning, when the sun was high and the air warm, Rallan prepared for a scouting mission. His commander had ordered patrols outside the walls to check for damage to the outer fences and to gather signs of beast activity. Most soldiers dreaded such missions, but Rallan welcomed it. He wanted answers. He wanted proof of what he had seen. Myra joined him, carrying a small pack of tools in case they needed to check wires or signals. Oren came too, holding his heavy spear. The three left through the north gate, stepping into the forest that surrounded the colony. The forest of Arkan was vast and filled with towering trees. The ground was covered with thick roots, and the air carried the scent of damp earth. The light broke through in patches, casting long shadows that seemed to move with every step. Even during the day, the forest felt alive, as if it were watching. They moved carefully, scanning for signs of the beasts. Broken branches, claw marks on bark, and deep tracks in the soil told the story of the recent attack. The creatures had been close, far closer than anyone had believed. As they pushed deeper, Rallan noticed something strange. On one tree, long claw marks formed lines that crossed each other. At first he thought it was random, but then he saw another tree nearby, marked in the same way. The shapes were not wild scratches. They were deliberate. "Myra, look at this," Rallan said, pointing to the marks. She studied them closely, running her hand over the grooves. "These are not random. They follow a pattern. It is almost like a message." Oren frowned. "A message from beasts, does that make sense?" "It makes more sense than saying they are simple animals," Rallan replied. "They think. They plan. This proves it." They walked farther and found more marked trees. The patterns were never the same, yet each carried order. Some formed triangles, others circles, and some even looked like paths. Rallan felt a chill. The beasts were not just hunters. They were builders of thought, perhaps even of language. The group stopped near a wide clearing. In the center stood a tree so large it seemed to touch the clouds. Its trunk was scarred with dozens of markings, arranged in spirals and shapes that stretched upward. It was not the work of chance. It was the work of intelligence. Myra whispered, "This is not just proof. This is a meeting place. They gather here." The three stood in silence, the weight of the discovery pressing down on them. The beasts had their own order, their own way of sharing knowledge. They were not only strong but also united. Suddenly, a rustle broke the silence. Rallan raised his rifle as Oren lifted his spear. From the shadows, a shape moved. A beast stepped into the clearing, its body tall and broad, its eyes glowing in the light. Unlike during the attack, it did not roar or charge. It stood still, watching them with quiet focus. Rallan's finger rested on the trigger, but he hesitated. The creature did not move closer, nor did it show its teeth. It simply observed them. Then, with slow and steady steps, it turned and slipped back into the trees, vanishing without sound. The three exchanged looks of shock. "It could have attacked," Oren said. "Why did it not?" "Because it did not need to," Rallan answered softly. "It wanted us to see this place. It wanted us to know." They returned to the colony with heavy thoughts. When Rallan reported what they had found, the commanders dismissed it again. They said claw marks meant nothing, that fear clouded judgment. But Rallan knew better. He had seen the spirals and patterns with his own eyes. He had seen the beast that chose not to strike. That night, as the colony settled into uneasy silence, Rallan looked out toward the forest. The walls were tall, the lights bright, and the weapons ready. Yet all of it felt fragile in the face of what he had discovered. The beasts were not wild shadows. They were thinkers, planners, and perhaps even rulers of the land. The colony had thought itself safe behind steel, but the truth was clear. The settlers were not only fighting for survival, they were facing an enemy that could outsmart them. Rallan whispered to himself, "They are learning. And they are waiting." The discovery in the forest stayed in Rallan's mind. The claw marks, the strange patterns, the giant tree with spirals that reached high into the sky, none of it could be forgotten. Yet when he reported it, the commanders turned away from his warning. They said beasts were nothing more than wild predators and the colony should not waste time fearing scratches on bark. The settlers wanted to believe the leaders, but unease spread in quiet whispers. Rallan, Myra, and Oren knew better. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. The beasts were watching, learning, and waiting. For a few nights, the forest stayed silent. No roars shook the air, no claws struck the walls. Some settlers thought the danger had passed, that the beasts had grown afraid of the strong defenses. But Rallan felt the quiet was not safety, it was planning. He had seen hunters before, patient and still before striking their prey. The forest was holding its breath, waiting for the moment to attack. On the seventh night after the first assault, the signs began. At first, the colony lights flickered. Myra checked the power stations, but nothing seemed broken. Then, water stopped flowing to some homes. Oren found the main pipes outside the wall had been cracked open. By dawn, strange shadows were seen moving near the southern gates. They were too fast to catch, slipping away before guards could aim their rifles. "They are testing us again," Rallan said, his voice steady but tense. "They want to see how we react." The settlers grew anxious. Families kept their children indoors, and farmers rushed their work, finishing before the sun went down. Everyone remembered the screams of the last attack. Fear spread like smoke through the colony. That night, the beasts returned. It began with silence. The forest seemed calm, almost too calm. Then, all at once, the ground shook. From the shadows poured dozens of creatures, their glowing eyes flashing as they moved like waves toward the wall. The alarms blared, and guards rushed to their posts. Pulse rifles lit the night with sharp beams, and the clash of steel rang as soldiers fought to keep the gates closed. Rallan stood with Myra and Oren at the northern section. He fired carefully, striking a beast that leapt high onto the wall. It fell back with a thud, but more followed. Oren thrust his spear at one that tried to climb, knocking it down before it could reach the ledge. Myra used her tools to activate sound traps they had prepared earlier, filling the air with piercing tones that disoriented the attackers for a moment. But the beasts did not stop. They were not wild, reckless hunters. They struck in patterns, some pushing at the gates while others cut the power lines again. Lights across the colony flickered out one by one, plunging whole sections into darkness. Families screamed inside their homes as the beasts howled outside the walls. In the chaos, Rallan noticed something chilling. The creatures did not all attack at once. Some moved forward, striking and clawing, then pulled back as others rushed in. They were taking turns, moving with a rhythm, as if commanded by a greater mind. "These are not random attacks," Rallan shouted over the noise. "They are using strategy." Myra's face was pale as she fixed another broken circuit. "If they know our weak points, the walls will not hold forever." The beasts tore at the southern gate with terrifying force. The steel groaned, shaking under their claws. The defenders rushed to reinforce it, but it was clear the beasts knew this was the weakest point. Explosions echoed as the attackers smashed fuel tanks and water supplies outside, sending fire and steam into the night sky. Despite the terror, the settlers fought back with courage. Soldiers fired from the walls, engineers worked to keep the lights alive, and even farmers grabbed tools to help defend their homes. The colony became a storm of fire and steel, a desperate fight for survival. Hours dragged on until, just before dawn, the beasts began to pull away. Their glowing eyes vanished into the forest once more, leaving behind smoke, broken walls, and exhausted settlers. The colony had survived again, but at a heavy cost. Power lines lay in ruins, food stores were burned, and many guards were wounded. The southern gate was cracked and would need days to repair. The beasts had not destroyed the colony, but they had crippled it. In the central square, Commander Terran gave another speech. His words were strong, but his voice carried strain. "We have stood against them again. They cannot break our walls. We will repair what is lost." The settlers tried to cheer, but their voices were weak. They had seen the truth. The beasts were not only attacking, they were learning. Each strike was sharper, more planned, more dangerous. That evening, Rallan sat with Myra and Oren by the northern wall. The forest was quiet once more, but none of them felt safe. Oren broke the silence. "If they keep learning, how long can we last?" Myra looked toward the dark trees. "Not long, unless we change the way we fight." Rallan kept his gaze on the horizon, his heart heavy. The colony could not keep waiting for the next attack. If they did, the walls would one day fall. The settlers needed to fight with more than weapons. They needed to fight with the one thing the beasts could not match, human spirit and cleverness. He whispered to himself, "The real battle is only beginning." The colony of Arkan lay in ruins after the second attack. Walls still stood, but scars of the battle marked every corner. Burned tanks, broken fences, and shattered homes reminded the settlers of the power of the beasts. The southern gate was cracked and weakened, and the forest outside seemed closer than ever before. Many settlers felt hopeless. Some whispered about leaving Arkan and returning to the core worlds. Others wanted to hide and hope the beasts would lose interest. But Rallan could not accept either choice. He knew the beasts would never stop. They had shown thought and patience, and now they had proved they could strike with precision. Waiting would only bring destruction. One evening, Rallan gathered Myra and Oren in a quiet corner of the colony. Elio, a young healer who had been tending to the wounded, joined them. His gentle hands and calm voice had saved many lives during the last attack. Now he too wanted to help. Rallan spoke with determination. The beasts are stronger than us, but they are not unbeatable. They fight with power and numbers, but we have something different. We can think, we can create, and we can use our minds in ways they cannot. Oren frowned. We fought with weapons, and still they came close to breaking through. What can we do that the soldiers have not already tried? Myra answered before Rallan. The soldiers fight with strength, but strength alone cannot win. We must fight with ideas. We must confuse them, trick them, and turn their own hunting against them. The small group agreed. They would not wait behind walls for the next attack. They would prepare, not with larger weapons, but with clever traps and tricks that could give the colony a chance. The next days were filled with secret work. Myra used scraps of broken machines to build sound devices that could create sharp, high tones to distract the beasts. Rallan studied the forest and mapped the paths where the creatures often moved. Oren gathered wood and heavy stones to set up hidden traps. Elio prepared smoke bombs from herbs and powders, mixtures he had once used for healing but now shaped for defense. Each plan was simple, but together they could make a difference. The beasts were strong, but they had never faced human imagination. One night, while the rest of the colony repaired walls, the group tested their first trap. They placed mirrors on the edges of the forest where the beasts often watched. When the moonlight struck, the mirrors reflected sudden flashes of light. For a brief moment, glowing eyes in the trees moved back in confusion, unsure what they saw. The next test came when Myra set her sound devices near the gates. When activated, they gave off sharp tones that echoed through the night. The beasts howled in anger, their movements scattered as they pulled back. For the first time, the settlers had forced the shadows to retreat without losing ground. The small victories filled the group with hope. They shared their results with a few trusted settlers, and soon others began to help. Farmers offered ropes, engineers shared broken parts, and children even painted stones to look like glowing eyes, which could be placed in the forest to frighten the creatures. The spirit of the colony began to change. Fear was still there, but it mixed with a new feeling: resistance. When the next attack came, the beasts expected another simple fight. They roared and charged the walls, claws flashing under the stars. But this time, the colony was ready. As the beasts neared, mirrors flashed light into their eyes, blinding some and slowing others. When they reached the gates, sharp tones rang out, disorienting them and scattering their movements. Smoke bombs filled the air, hiding the defenders' positions. Traps of heavy stones dropped from above, striking the ground with crushing force. The battle was fierce, but it was different from before. The settlers were not only defending, they were controlling the fight. Every trap, every trick, every sound turned the beast's strength against them. Rallan fought with calm focus, Myra worked her devices with steady hands, Oren used his spear to strike at just the right moments, and Elio moved among the wounded, keeping them alive so they could return to the fight. The beasts, confused and angered, pulled back sooner than before. Their howls echoed as they fled into the forest, leaving behind silence once more. The colony cheered, louder than ever. For the first time, they had not only survived but also fought back with power born from cleverness. Children laughed, and families hugged, their fear lifted, even if only for a moment. That night, as the fires burned low and the walls stood tall, Rallan looked out into the forest. He knew the beasts would return, stronger and more determined. But now he also knew something else. The people of Arkan had found their spirit. They were more than settlers hiding behind steel. They were fighters, thinkers, and survivors. Rallan spoke softly to his friends. The beasts have power, but we have something they cannot take from us. We have each other, and we have the will to stand. As long as we keep using our minds, they will never truly break us. Myra smiled, Oren gripped his spear with pride, and Elio nodded quietly. The shadows outside were still deep and full of danger, but inside the walls, hope had returned. The war was far from over, but the humanoid spirit had awakened. The victory gave the settlers of Arkan a taste of hope. For the first time, they had forced the beasts to retreat, not with brute strength but with clever ideas. Children played again in the square during the day, farmers worked with lighter hearts, and soldiers walked the walls with pride. Yet beneath the surface, fear still lived. Everyone knew the beasts would not stay away for long. Rallan did not let hope blind him. He had seen the way the beasts had learned from every battle. They studied, they adapted, and they came back stronger each time. If the colony had found new tricks, then the beasts would soon find ways around them. He could almost feel the forest watching, waiting for the next move. One evening, as the sun set behind the tall trees, Rallan climbed the northern wall with Myra, Oren, and Elio. Together, they looked toward the horizon. The forest was silent, yet the silence felt heavy. "They are planning something," Rallan said quietly. Myra nodded. "We fooled them once, maybe twice, but they will not fall for the same tricks again." Oren tightened his grip on his spear. "Let them come. We will fight as many times as it takes." Elio, calm as always, placed a hand on the wall. "Courage is good, but courage without wisdom will only lead to loss. We must be ready for more than we expect." That night, the air grew colder. The sky was covered with thick clouds, and no moonlight reached the ground. It was a night of complete darkness. The alarms rang as movement stirred in the forest. At first, it was only shadows flickering between the trees. Then came the sound of hundreds of feet striking the ground, a deep rumble like thunder rolling closer. The beasts returned. This time, their attack was greater than ever before. They poured from the forest in numbers the settlers had never imagined. Glowing eyes filled the dark like stars scattered across the land. Their roars shook the walls, and the earth trembled beneath their charge. The settlers rushed to defend. Pulse rifles fired, beams of light cut through the dark, and smoke bombs filled the air. The mirrors flashed, and the sound devices screamed. But the beasts had changed. They no longer scattered at the tones. They no longer slowed at the lights. They broke the traps, crushed the mirrors, and pressed forward with unstoppable force. The walls shook as claws scraped against steel. The southern gate groaned under the weight of the attackers. The beasts struck in waves, some climbing high, others smashing the ground to weaken the structure. Fires spread as fuel tanks outside exploded under their assault. Rallan fought with steady focus, his rifle glowing with every shot. Beside him, Oren swung his spear at a beast that leapt onto the wall, pushing it back into the shadows. Myra worked frantically, fixing broken circuits to keep the lights alive. Elio rushed between the wounded, binding injuries with calm hands even as chaos surrounded him. The battle raged on without pause. The settlers shouted, the beasts roared, and the colony became a storm of fire and terror. From the northern wall, Rallan saw something that froze his heart. Among the countless attackers, one stood taller than the rest. Its shoulders were broad, its body massive, and its glowing eyes burned brighter than all others. "The leader," Rallan whispered. The creature moved with clear purpose, guiding the other beasts. When it roared, the attackers surged together. When it stepped back, they pulled away in unison. It was no wild predator. It was a commander, a mind behind the chaos. Rallan fired at it, but the shots only grazed its thick hide. The leader turned its burning eyes toward the wall where Rallan stood, and for a moment, the two locked gaze. In those eyes, Rallan saw intelligence, cold and sharp. The beast charged the southern gate, its claws tearing deep into the steel. The defenders tried to stop it, firing and striking with all their strength, but the gate bent under its power. Screams echoed as the settlers realized the wall might finally fall. Rallan's mind raced. He knew they could not outfight the leader with weapons alone. They needed something different. He shouted to Myra. "The machines in the old factory. Can we collapse it? Myra's eyes widened. If we overload the fuel tanks, yes. But it will fall on everything near it. Then we lure it there, Rallan said firmly. It is the only way. With Oren and Myra beside him, Rallan rushed from the wall, moving through the burning colony toward the factory near the southern gate. The leader beast tore through steel as it advanced, guiding its army closer. Rallan and his friends set the charges, wires sparking as Myra connected them. Oren shouted, "It is coming!" The ground shook as the leader approached, towering over the defenders. With a final roar, it charged the factory, smashing through its walls. At that moment, Myra triggered the overload. The night lit up with fire and sound as the factory collapsed in a storm of flames and falling steel. The leader beast was caught beneath the wreckage, its roar silenced by the crushing weight. The other beasts, seeing their commander fall, let out cries of confusion. Their attack wavered, and slowly, they began to retreat into the forest. The settlers stood in shock, their weapons still raised, their hearts pounding. The wall was cracked, the colony burned, but they had survived once more. Rallan, covered in ash and sweat, stared at the smoking ruins. "We stopped them," he said, though his voice carried no joy. Myra, breathing hard, shook her head. "We stopped one. But the forest is full of others. They will return." The people cheered in the square that dawn, celebrating survival. But Rallan knew the truth. The beasts had a leader, and if one had fallen, another could rise. The colony had shown courage and cleverness, but the shadows still stretched long beyond the walls. The war was far from over. The morning after the great battle was quiet. Smoke drifted from the ruins of the factory, and the southern gate stood cracked but still upright. The colony of Arkan had survived the fiercest assault yet. The people gathered in the square, their faces pale with exhaustion but lifted with hope. For the first time, they had seen the leader of the beasts fall. Children clung to their parents, asking if the danger was over. Farmers, soldiers, and engineers stood side by side, staring at the broken walls and burned fields. They wanted to believe it was the end. They wanted to believe victory was finally theirs. Commander Taran raised his voice before the crowd. "We fought with strength and courage. The beasts came in numbers greater than ever before, yet they could not break us. The walls still stand, and our people live. Today, we have won." The settlers cheered, their voices rising in relief. For a moment, the colony felt whole again. But among the crowd, Rallan stood silent. His eyes were fixed on the forest beyond the wall, its shadows deep and endless. He could not join in the cheer, for he knew the truth. The battle was not the end. It was only a pause. Later, Rallan met with Myra, Oren, and Elio near the ruins of the factory. The ground was blackened, steel beams twisted and broken. Beneath the wreckage, the body of the great leader beast was buried, silent at last. Oren leaned on his spear, his face weary but proud. "We crushed it. Without their commander, the beasts lost their will. They will not return soon." Myra shook her head. "Do not be so sure. If one leader existed, there may be others. We have seen their unity, their patterns. That kind of order does not come from a single creature. There must be more behind them." Elio, who had spent the night healing the wounded, added in his calm tone, "The people need hope, but hope without truth is fragile. If we pretend this war is over, we will not be ready when the forest moves again." Rallan agreed with them all. The colony had earned a victory, but it was not complete. The beasts had been pushed back, not destroyed. Over the following days, the settlers rebuilt. Engineers repaired the power lines, carpenters strengthened the walls, and families cleared the burned fields. Every pair of hands worked together, driven by the memory of survival. Yet as they worked, they carried fear in their hearts. Every sound from the forest, every flicker of shadow, brought back the memory of glowing eyes. Still, something had changed. The colony was no longer only hiding. They were preparing. Rallan, Myra, Oren, and Lio trained small groups to use traps, mirrors, sound devices, and smoke bombs. Farmers practiced setting decoys. Children were taught to signal danger with whistles. Everyone became part of the defense. The spirit of Arkan was no longer weak. It was strong, united, and ready. One evening, Rallan climbed the northern wall and looked into the forest. The sun dipped low, and the trees turned dark as night spread. He thought of the leader beast, crushed beneath the factory, and the countless others that had retreated. He remembered their eyes sharp, thoughtful, filled with purpose. Myra joined him on the wall. "You are still worried," she said softly. Rallan nodded. "The forest is not empty. The beasts are watching. They will return, and they will return smarter. But now we are ready. We know how to fight with more than weapons. We know how to fight with spirit." Oren climbed up beside them, gripping his spear with pride. "Let them come. We will never bow." Lio followed, his quiet voice steady. "Fear will always be here, but courage can live beside it. As long as we stand together, no shadow can break us." The four friends looked out into the distance. The night was filled with silence, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of waiting. Somewhere in the deep forest, the beasts healed their wounds, studied their losses, and planned their return. When dawn came, the colony gathered once more in the square. This time, it was not to mourn or fear but to promise. The settlers swore to protect their home, to fight not only with rifles and walls but with unity and cleverness. They swore that Arkan would not fall. Rallan spoke to them, his voice strong though he was only a scout. "We are not prey. We are not weak. We are settlers of Arkan, and we will not run. The beasts are strong, but we are stronger in spirit. Let them come, and we will show them again and again what it means to face humans." The people shouted in answer, their voices echoing against the steel walls. It was not the sound of fear. It was the sound of a colony that had found its courage. As night fell once more, the forest remained dark and silent. The beasts did not return that day, nor the next. But Rallan knew the quiet was only a shadow before the storm. One day, the glowing eyes would return, and when they did, the war would begin again. Yet this time, the people of Arkan would not tremble. They would rise. And in the end, whether in victory or in struggle, the story of humanity would shine brighter than the shadows of terror.